Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I made this black velvet gown with this draped gold, gorgeous sequin and glitter sash and humongous dramatic bow. As with all projects that I work on, I always start with the pattern. So here I've already made the paper pattern for this column gown and I've placed it onto my black velvet fabric, and then I cut it out. I then proceeded to cut out the bodice pieces in the black velvet. And once I had all of my black velvet pieces cut, I then went on to cut out the lining. When all of my dress pieces were cut, I went over to my sewing machine and I started sewing all of the pieces together, starting with the lining, the side seams of the skirt, and then the bodice pieces. I do also want to point out that for the bodice, I used the pattern pieces and cut a layer of canvas as well. This layer of canvas is going to go in between the velvet and the lining to act as a layer of stability and as a layer to sew my boning onto, which you can see right here. This will add structure and stability to a strapless garment. Once I had applied the boning to the canvas, I went ahead and I basted the black velvet bodice pieces to the canvas bodice pieces. I then attached those bodice pieces to the skirt pieces and pinned them to the Judy just to see how everything was looking. I was happy with how everything was going so far, so I joined the dress at the side seams, and then I put the invisible zipper in center back. After putting the zipper in, I put boning into the side seams at the bodice because I hadn't done that yet. I waited until joining the side seams of the velvet dress to put the boning into the side seams. I then went ahead and cut black ribbons to act as my hanger loops, and then I joined the lining to the velvet at the neckline, securing those hanger loops at those side seams between the self and the lining. And then I understitched all around the neckline. With the dress coming along together really nicely, I then put it on my dress form just to see how everything was going, to assess the situation. And then I was then able to start draping the gold glitter fabric onto the front to create this beautiful pleated sash effect. I do want to add that I was just temporarily pinning the gold fabric to the dress just to test it out, see how it draped, see how it would look on the body. And I was just getting it ready for my client who actually purchased this gown because I wanted to see how it looked on her before we properly finished the sash and bow onto the dress. I did my fitting with my client off camera as she didn't want to be in the video. At that fitting, we determined the fit of the dress was pretty perfect. We didn't have to do any tweaks to the fit of the dress. All we had to do was shorten the hem as it was a couple of inches too long. So what I'm doing here is I'm clean finishing the dress at the center back by attaching the lining to the self and sandwiching the zipper in between the two layers. Now taking the dress over to the iron, I then proceeded to pin the hem up using a 1-inch seam allowance. And if you didn't already know this, you can't actually iron velvet because what happens is when you put an iron on velvet, you damage it by flattening the fibers, which is known as the pile. So what I did instead was I placed the iron a couple of inches above the velvet and then I steamed the hem in place. After that, I went ahead and I finished it by hand. I want to point out that because the dress is a column silhouette, it doesn't really allow for a lot of leg movement. So in order to accommodate for a nice comfortable walk and movement in the leg, you need to have a slit in the back of the skirt, which is what I did here. So I'm just securing the lining to the velvet at the slit and then understitching on the lining. When the base of the gown was actually done, I then proceeded to drape a layer of gold satin onto the bodice of the front. This was going to act to brighten the layer of glitter that went above it, and also help me determine where that glitter fabric was going to be placed strategically onto the front of the dress. Also, this gold layer of satin had to be secured to the dress using hand sewing only. It wouldn't have been possible to sew the gold satin onto the black velvet because the dress had already been completely finished from the outside and the inside. After I was happy with where that gold layer of satin was sewn, I then draped the gold layer of glitter fabric directly above it, and by pleating the gold glitter fabric, it added an element of interest and sculptural detail. When I was happy with how the gold glitter fabric was sitting on the dress, I then went ahead and I secured it by hand using a needle and thread. I had to do this carefully because I didn't want the thread to come through on the inside of the dress and show through the lining. I had to make sure it was only getting sewn to the velvet. When the front draping was complete, I then went ahead and I started cutting out the tails for the bow out of the gold glitter fabric and lined in the gold satin. I cut two of these semicircle shapes. One was larger and one was smaller. And then I cut a half circle hole on the side that had the straight edge. Now here I am just laying out the gold glitter fabric onto the gold satin fabric. They needed to be the exact same shape and size so they could be sewn together at the right size and clean finished all around the edges. Now over at my machine, I'm simply joining the lining to the glitter fabric, right sides together, and sewing all around. I made sure to leave an opening at the semicircle hole that I had cut out along the straight edge. That way I could turn the piece right side out. When the tails were complete, I took them over to the dress and I hand sewed them to the bottom of that sash that I had draped earlier. At the back of the studio, while I was busy working on the dress in the front, the bow for the dress was being formed by sewing two long rectangles together, one layer of nude horsehair and one layer of the gold glitter fabric. The horsehair gave the bow structure and stability that it needed in order to hold its dramatic shape. I had to play around with it for a little while on the dress until I was completely happy with the way that it was looking. Once I was perfectly happy and satisfied with the direction that the bow was going in, I then secured it to the dress by hand using a needle and thread. And when that was done, it was time to finish the dress off with a hook and eye and a label. And here are some images of the finished gown. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun creating this special piece and love sharing the creative process with you. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.